Isabel Fish. I am actually in London, UK. This is a live recording. It's just like TV here, I think. We have 3 computers going. We have Taylor in Toronto, and Maria Gasparian and I are here in London. We are in the beautiful Studio Pottery London studio. And before we start, I'm actually going to give you a quick little look at this beautiful studio, because if you come to London, you should really come and have a look. So Studio Pottery London is both a school and a studio for artists. You can see there's going to be actually some students arriving tonight in about 15 minutes. So forgive the background noise, but this is a working studio. And one of the founders of the studio is Gregory Tinge, who is an amazing potter, originally from Zimbabwe. And I'm showing you here his pots. You see, he does sgraffito, which is a technique to scratch the surface.
That's Fernando.
And Gregory, unfortunately, is not here today, but we will share with you an article and an interview I did of him, and you can see his work is really beautiful. So it's a studio where you have members, and the artists can also teach and use the facility. You can see it's really well set up. So we are in the library here, and here is Maria Gasparian, who is our speaker today. We're going to do a quick switcheroo of computers so that you can enjoy her presentation. As I was saying, we are often thinking about ceramics in the context of the house, of the domestic, of the inside. We rarely think about ceramics on the outside, on the cladding of the building, you know, on the pavement, in the streetscape, the street furniture. And Maria is very much about that. She wants us to look up when we walk and look at all the beauty that is there. She's both, she's actually an architect initially, and that element of knowing about building and about the streetscape comes from that. Then she discovered ceramic. She discovered that amazing contact and the pleasure of working with clay. And then she thought, well, let's put the two together. She did her PhD on that, is that right?
Absolutely.
And she's going to share with us now her findings, her vision, and how she's really trying to bring the handmade built in our buildings, in the outside of our buildings. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Inviting me and connecting me with the audience in Canada. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I can see old friends as well. Hi, Christine. It's really an international audience we've got today. I'm gonna, well, firstly, as you introduced me, lovely, I'm an architect, and we're going to talk about ceramics in architecture today. And I will share my insider's view of being both architect, but also ceramic artist, because I don't only design, but I'm myself, and I also do the design part of it. So I combine both in my practice. I would love to share with you my slides, and I will talk first about my background and inspiration that I use in my work, and I will show you some of the examples of my work, as well as a couple of projects which actually showcase of what I managed to achieve within the last few years within my practice. So I will share the presentation. Is this one right? We had a bit of a... All right. So as I said, I make ceramics myself, and my journey is a funny one, because I've been trained as an architect, and I worked for many years in a large commercial architectural practice in London. I've come from Armenia. It's a small country in Caucasus. I'll talk about that as well. But I've graduated in Armenia. I retrained in London, and I worked in a large commercial company that designed multi-million big developments, shopping centers and public spaces. But then when I discovered ceramics by literally going into pottery class, and that was really that transformed my life completely. It was this immediacy of working with material, touching the clay. It's literally a physical pleasure, really. People who make ceramics will understand what I mean. And it's actually transformed my practice completely because you've got this immediacy of working with material, but also you can see how things are made. And I think for architects, it's really essential. For any designer, it's essential to understand how things are made. Only then you can actually design with insider's view.
I
Otherwise,
always
it's difficult, right?
I always thought it was extremely peculiar that architects are in an office and
they don't make things.
They don't make things. They don't know how things are made. They have to have a designer, and I mean, it's
material
really
specialist.
bizarre.
Really,
yeah.
I think quite often. I mean, literally, it's impossible to do everything in your life. And Renaissance men did it all, but we not anymore.
No, I know.
And there is quite a big distinction in the practice these days of designers design, makers make. But I think there is an amazing value.
It's a mistake,
isn't it? It's a mistake, yeah. And many aesthetic movements throughout 20th century brought this to life. Bauhaus spoke about it, arts and crafts, of course, as well.
Yeah, for sure.
They said that you need to make and then design through making.
Yeah.
There was a whole school of thought about that. It is coming back a bit now, but I think it's not enough. So I think this is really important point in my practice as well at the moment. So I design and I make, and I do bespoke products, bespoke pieces, as well as designing for public spaces. And public space is something that is quite difficult to design for, but I'll come to that as well in a minute. And on the back of that fuels my practice is research. I've done a lot of studying in my life. I've done masters in ceramic design here in London at Centre St. Martin's. And as it wasn't enough, I've done PhD on the subject as well. So it's been a very exciting journey, but ultimately I know more now and being able to design with insider's view. So today we will speak about my practice a little bit, about a notion of handmade and machine-made materials, which is really in the core of this, providing architecture with something that is bespoke, special, has identity, not a standard and same. This is quite a sort of old discourse and been throughout, again, 20th century, again, through arts and crafts, about how shall we design and how things should be made, whether it's traditional craft, whether it's industrial, and this mass production and industrial bespoke was always sort of conundrum, was always a very hot topic of discussion, isn't it? And this is actually the essence of my practice. I'm juggling these two notions, trying to combine them. And I will also take you on a travel. I'll take you to the travel into Europe and US, which I've done in 2016, researching architectural ceramics. And I will share two of the projects that I've built in London. So as I said, my ceramic journey started from a pottery class. And at the time, it was just an evening class for adults. And I wasn't planning to do it for work, for job, for life, but it just turned out slightly different. So I used to make plates, cups, tableware, and I thought, this is so good. I don't want to do architecture. I want to do only this. But later, when I went to St. Martin's to do masters, my tutor said, you've got too much to offer. Let's do something bigger than just the plates. But what fascinated me about pottery is I had this book which had all the techniques in it. And I went painstakingly through every process, coil making, pinch pots, throwing on a wheel, slab building, slip casting, all of those techniques that actually exist throughout millennia. People done them from beginning of beginning of civilization. I always preach about ceramics. This is the oldest man-made material on earth. And because clay is so ubiquitous, it exists everywhere in the world. Wherever you dig, there is a clay. It's very accessible, and things you can do with it are really limitless. So this was my discoveries on my pottery journey. And I've done, bespoke large pieces, sculptural pieces. But being an architect, this is, I think, many architects do that. I constantly in my practice zoom in and zoom out. This is like I always do. I can't help it. So I look at things at the close by, and then I zoom out to see a whole lot. And when I was doing pottery, what I realized is that why not? If you do something on a pot, and it's the same material as the clay that builds our cities, because lots of walls, particularly in London, made out of clay, ceramics. You know, the brick is ceramic, the tiles are ceramic, toilets are ceramic, but we won't talk about them today. But whatever you do with a pot in terms of ceramic techniques and decoration, absolutely can be scaled up.
Right.
And this was beginning of my thesis for my PhD, with the question, why not? And if the question is yes, let's do it, the question is how? Because again, throughout 20th century, it's been lost.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you're really going back to what was done, you know, because that's not new. What we're looking at is not new, but we have forgotten about it. And I have to say that in North America in particular, I can see in Toronto where they're building tower after tower after tower, it's all glass and concrete and metal. And the fact that urban planners, contemporary current urban planners and architects do not understand the importance of making a streetscape beautiful by adding the materials and the layers and the details is astonishing. I mean, it's the best and cheapest way to keep people happy and to keep a community engaged. So
totally, absolutely, totally. That's exactly what I wanted to say.
Sorry.
No, you said it. You said it for me much better.
I'm quite passionate about that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Makes two of us. I think it's really important for me as an architect. It's really important point to say that, you know, we cannot build bland spaces. It makes people unhappy.
Yeah.
By bringing even small elements of joy makes such a big difference. You see the care that and the thought that's been put in, and also making things specific, site specific, context specific. Putting a story in your environment is so important, whether it's inside or outside, whether it's small or large scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the sort of preamble of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'd like to talk about my personal, heritage and where I come from. As I said, I come from Armenia. It's a small country on Caucasus on a crossroad between East and West. Armenia is a tiny Christian country, and it's neighboring Turkey, Iran, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And it's always historically, since Middle Ages, been on the crossroad. Armenian traders used to take caravans on the Silk Route. They had monopoly on the Silk Route. But ultimately, it wasn't just the silk, but loads of traders and craftspeople traveled. And what was fascinating, and I find it really fascinating by looking at the architecture, medieval and old architecture in Armenia, that old buildings have this ornamentation in detailing that is actually showing the mixture of the cultures and mixture of the influences from east to west. So, as I believe, and there are lots of writing about this, that the craftspeople traveled. They traveled and they brought with them not just the skill of working with material, but also ornamentation. For example, stylized flowers or geometrical motifs that come from East and settle in Christian country like Armenia. If you could look at the image on the right, where you have a cross, it's a cross stone, and there are plentiful of them in Armenia. But ornamentation on the perimeter, you can see in Islamic architecture. And that's, I find, really fascinating, because obviously there were craftspeople who traveled through Iran for Persia at the time. Ottoman, this is 13th century. So there was Ottoman Empire. We've been conquered as well. That's another thing.
Right.
We've been under Turks, under Persians and Arabs and Greeks, you name it, we had it. But ultimately, the influences in the culture and in ornamental art stayed.
Yeah.
And it enriches, the same as with colonial, we were talking about this, about Britain.
Yes.
And about the heritage and mixture of cultures that exists in London. It's wonderful, the cultural influences that are reflected in decorative arts.
So I just want to say that, to your point, that decoration which is around the cross here, that you said is a motif from Iran, you see that motif in India when you go, because India,
had Mughal influence. Yes, exactly, which were from Persia.
Who are from Persia.
Yeah.
And there's actually, if you are in London, go to see the Great Mughal exhibition at the V&A. We are doing that on Monday with a group who's traveling with me this week. But it's fascinating to see how these cultural influences, these aesthetic and pattern influences are so fluid from country to country, from
and century to century as well.
Century to century, and stay there, and then become this great kind of melting pot of decorative art.
Yeah, yeah. Something else I want to say here is ornament can be applied or structural. And in these two images, ornamentation is built into the fabric of the building, and it survived from 13th century. And this one is from 4th. Paintings can be painted over or stripped, colors fade, but something that is integral to the structure of the building stays.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of a survival thing of ornamentation. Color, it's another thing that I find very, very important. It's really quite important in my personal work, but also to show the cultural influences and locality as well. I think almost every culture in the world has their own, not a color, but, palette. And it's a palette of motifs, palette of colors, and palette of ornamentation. And you can tell, again, this fascinating link between the cultures and between, nations and locality. And one thing about locality is the materials. The local materials, the craft people who use local materials. For example, here you see the color red that comes, this is Armenian carpets. You can see they're very similar to Iznik, not Iznik, but the kilim from Turkey. The red color comes from a little bug called Ararat Kashinil, which lives only in Ararat Valley, which is in Armenia. So the pigment, this red pigment that people use to dye the carpets, very, very local, but traveled around. They use it for books and from Middle Ages, and still there.
Yeah,
still there. So red
this red, if you go to, I mean, this is obvious. I don't want to teach people how to suck eggs, but every region will have an item, a material locally that will produce a red that is ever so slightly different and will be very specific. You can, I mean, ethnologue and archaeologists can pinpoint it to a valley, to a small locality, because that specific plant and that specific insect only live there.
Yeah. Okay, moving further. Now, my second home is London. I lived in London more than half of my life. So, living in Armenia and coming here, I love London, and I think it's absolutely fascinating place of a melting pot, again, of cultures. I've been here so many years, but I never felt foreign, which is very strange to say by living somewhere else. Because everybody's from somewhere else.
That's right.
People here bring their own cultures, bring their own stories, and live in this multicultural, very exciting city that everybody has something to bring to. And I really hope that, I can bring something else to London while I live here. But we all enjoy the culture, that we're all very open with the beautiful museums, amazing craft heritage. And we were talking about arts and crafts with Isabel before. And one thing about Victorian time, when people started traveling, when, with the empire, being the biggest empire in the world at the time, middle of 19th century, Victorian architects been influenced by many findings that, artifacts brought from colonies, but also by the people traveling to Europe. There was this thing about European tours, people would send their children to Europe to go and see the culture in Italy. So they would come and be fascinated by Italian architecture, from Rome and Greece as well. So Owen Jones was very interesting proponent of arts and crafts movement, and he made this book called Grammar of Ornament. And there were pages and pages of patterns from different cultures, and those were given as a sort of pattern book to architects and to designers. And there we go, we have movements and all ornamental sort of language in Victorian Britain. Of course, arts and crafts produced a lot of ceramics, and there were William de Morgan, one of the biggest sort of figures in arts and crafts movement, who made beautiful tiles, and William Morris, of course, with all of his big industry, not just ceramics, but wallpapers and textiles. Now, what was really interesting, looking at motifs again, William de Morgan, the top image in red is luster glazes that came from Persia, came from Iran. Maybe they came here from India, I don't know, but these luster glazes were developed in Iran in Middle Ages and were used by arts and crafts artists. In the bottom, you see carnation that you can see in Iznik tiling. And on the right, you can see the beautiful ornamentation by William Morris, which is, you can see that in Arabic, it's arabesque, which is interweaving floral motifs. One thing about arts and crafts, which is really interesting, is that it started as medieval revival. And the main, it wasn't just aesthetic movement, but it was a social movement. And main figures of arts and crafts movements were some of them were anti-industrialists, weren't they? I mean, this was time of industrial revolution in England, and factories were producing lots of wares, and there was a boom in technology. However, in arts, people were looking back and anti-industrial forms of production. But what was interesting, that even though they wanted to deliver beautiful goods to every home in Britain, I apply to anybody, the workers, they were not affordable, because they were simply too expensive. They were made by hand. They were one-off bespoke pieces, beautifully made, but they were only, they could be afforded only by upper middle class. And those beautiful tiles could be found in mansion houses, around fireplaces, in interiors mainly. So I wouldn't say failed, but I think in a way they did fail the definition of appealing, delivering to nation.
Yeah. William Morris had a business model issue.
Yeah, he had. Now, taking this into account, in my own practice, I thought, how we can crack this in 21st century? How can we make bespoke, beautiful pieces that actually can be produced affordably? They can be applied. And hand versus machine. It's always been on the books for arts and crafts movement and many other movements in 20th century. And that was my starting point as well. So when I started making ceramics, I made everything by hand. But as an architect, I use digital tools. Widely, I always did. I draw on a computer. I model on computer, 3D model. And I don't shy in using 3D printers and laser cutters and CNC cutters, which really actually allows to produce things with precision and replicate them as well. Right. So it's an amazing tool. And there are, different people feel differently about digital, hand, and industrial. But I think if you use it rightly, I wouldn't give machine to do the best bits, but I love using it as a tool. I really love using it as a tool. So hand or machine, that was the question. And I must say, I love the factories. I love factories. I go to factories all the time, and I love industrial manufacturing. And this image here shows an industrially produced clay pieces called bricks. This is extruding machine, and the clay, and it's this size, the aperture of the yellow opening is that big. So the clay is pressed under lots of pressure through this die, the cut, into a long piece. And then it's cut with a cheese cutter into units, fired, and there you go. There are lots of bricks, standardized. And the factories produce thousands and thousands of them a day. They produce millions of bricks, all uniform, all beautiful, with beautiful local clay, but they're standardized. So my question was, how can we combine both, and how we can produce expressive pieces by using technology that's used in industry? So I went into the other side of a spectrum and used hand extruder, which is a small machine, by making extrusion pieces and seeing how far I can go in making those very expressive and very bespoke and very unique. I've always been influenced by decorative motifs, and maybe having that at the back of my mind, my pieces, my early early extruded pieces were very much like a foliage of Art Nouveau, and I've made those in the beginning when I was only using hand production, and those are bespoke pieces that can be put on the walls, can be used as a partitions, but again, they are very fragile, and I wouldn't put them outside, even though they are ceramics. So being an architect, I always, again, zoom out, and I think where you can apply it in the interiors, for example, or indeed in the exteriors. And this was, again, the starting point for me to go on a PhD journey, when I sort of questioned, what will happen if you put ceramic pieces in the cityscape, in a blunt gray monochrome surrounding, and what will happen, how that would influence the atmosphere, the environment, if you put highly expressive, colorful pieces on the walls, on the ground, above you. So it's difficult. That was the answer. And
well, I think that there is, I mean, in your system, you still produce these decorative pieces for the outside wall by hand. So, you know, whether it's an individual who's buying those pieces or a city for their public landscape,
yeah,
we still have this issue of pricing and of accessibility through pricing.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Isabel. And I think this is, it's not a magic, and it's still going to be always the case. If something is produced by hand and is bespoke, one-off piece, and it's large, it's obviously is much more expensive to produce than produce something in a factory. So for bespoke interior piece, which I would produce, of course, it will cost much more than something.
But the calculation is different. You need to look at the long term. We've been so, I mean, this is nothing new again. We've had that conversation before, but we've been so conditioned to think for immediate reward, immediate cost analysis. And, you know, if it's not expensive, then it doesn't matter if I get rid of it or if it doesn't last. We cannot think like that anymore.
No.
And, you know, the value of a piece is not in its price.
No.
It's in its effect on the community, it's in its duration, it's in its supply chain consequences and impact on the environment and all that. We really need to go back to a different way, or to create a different way of pricing and valuing, which are two different things, these pieces.
I think you're absolutely right. Value is a big thing, and value is not just my money. To me, and sustainability as well. It's not just about recycling. I think sustainable architecture, sustainable art, or sustainable impact has to be through beauty, and the word beauty is really underused, I think, and architects are not allowed to use it actually between us. Beauty being like bands, you can't talk about beauty. It has to be utilitarian, it has to be useful, it has to be strong, load bearing, whatever. But to me, beauty brings value with no doubt. It really brings beauty. If something is beautiful, you wouldn't throw it away. You would keep it.
Yeah.
So if you design beautifully, if it actually is beautiful, people care about it.
And if you understand how it's been made.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. And that's why craft, I think, is so important, because it has this vast value attached to it through making.
Right.
So if you make something well, if it looks beautiful, it has amazing value and it brings value with it. So if you integrate that into a building, to me, that's a winner.
Right.
Yeah. Whether it's interior or exterior. Okay, so going back, how it can be done. In my practice, I combine traditional craft, which is handcraft, with the digital techniques and industrial manufacturing. And that makes artwork fit for integration into fabric of the building, because it is a big issue. There are many artists, wonderful artists that I know, that would love to make something for buildings, but they don't know how to go about all the draconian regulations that architects have, that city planners have. And I'm not saying they are not necessary.
Is it your mom's?
What's going on?
We need to mute some people there.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So basically, yeah, it's quite a task. Do we carry on? Yeah. I was thought. Right. So yeah. So as I said, I use craft. I use digital tools, and I work in industrial settings. I think I mentioned that I've got studio space in the factory, and it's not brilliant. It's not beautifully sort of lit studio, but it's working space, and it's actually has its value because it's where the things are made and produced on a larger scale.
You are the bridge.
Right? And
you
the
really
bridge.
have the
And
bridge. The bridge between the workbench and the production line.
Exactly. So what I do, I have a luxury. I have a very privileged position in a factory that I prototype in a factory in settings, and they fire my work. And on several projects that I've done for city spaces, this was the key issue. They actually made it the way they would make any other standard bricks that have a quality. But the prototyping and achieving form, texture, and color is really essential in my work, being an artist. And I think painterly qualities of the color, the depth of glaze, and the texture that is very varied, to me, it's a valuable, aspects of my work. And I think it's valuable aspects that can be brought into architecture and make it very bespoke and very specific to the site and to the story that we're trying to tell. Clay, again, I can't talk enough about clay. You touch it and it changes the shape, and you can change it again. It's very forgiving material. You can add to it, you can take away, and you can play with it until you actually put it in a firing. But when you put it in the firing, that's it. It stays there forever. It becomes stone-like. And again, I speak to many artists. And me, myself, I feel responsible. Once it's fired, it's there for centuries, for millennia.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of responsibility. But it's a wonderful material. And this is just few images of what can be achieved with a brick, with the brick clay, and the colors, as I said, colors that can be applied to clay. It's exactly the same way as you do with the pottery, because it's the same material.
Right.
Of course, it's different types of clay, different colors of clay, but techniques. I mean, what I've just showed you, it's a salt glazes, it's copper, cobalt, oxides, which you would be using in tableware.
And these motifs that we were seeing there, these leaves and all that on the brick, how is that achieved? Is it pressed?
It's embossed.
It's embossed.
Okay. But again, there are different ways. Exactly the same way. It's the same techniques that potters would use.
Yeah, just
again, you open the pottery. Yeah, you open the pottery book, whether you make it in a mold, whether you make it with a pressing something. But again, there are all sorts of things like, you make bricks in a wooden mold, so clay doesn't stick.
Right.
You can use plaster molds.
Right.
I mean, there is. It's another conversation, I think.
Now I see, Taylor. I see that there are lots of messages. I haven't read them. Are there any questions in there we should be addressing?
No questions so far in there.
No questions. Okay. Thank you.
We better speed up, I think. So the colors, the shapes, the textures. And once I sort of do the prototyping, I'm able then to produce small batch production. Again, what is really interesting in the factories, and one has to really appreciate that in a large production, large factories are really not flexible. So you can customize and make something very specific in a smaller, more flexible facilities, and do something like this, which is actually take on medieval encaustic tile that I just showed you now, which was 13th century, where clay inlaid with a different color clay, and I inlaid with a glaze. But these are all pieces that you can build with. And the way I achieve it is because I work with the manufacturers. I collaborate.
Right.
Lots of my work is collaborative. And then again, being an architect, you think, where can you use it? Whether you use it on the floor, on a wall, or just as an interior decoration. Again, this would make a beautiful feature wall in somebody's kitchen or in the office. Again, motifs that are innate to my work, variety of textures and colors. Water, I wanted to talk about this actually. Pottery and ceramics always been waterproof and been used for containing liquids since beginning of times. Pots been containing water, wine, oil, and the buildings actually trying to keep water away, throw water out, keep it away from the facade. So clay being a barrier for elements is quite poetic, I think, as a language. So I made this design, which is inverted vessel that can be incorporated into a wall. Okay, so yeah, the water draining of the facade is something that can be done with clay on the buildings by using bricks and using different motifs. And basically, what's happening here is decoration and function becomes one. Yeah, and again, the water thrown out and draining of the facade by using inverted cups.
This is the pattern of the brick. The extrusion has been glazed. And then if we look at the slide before, then the water will come
Trickle.
trickle down.
Yeah.
So there was a cascade on the wall, and yet you are protecting the inside of the building
Precisely.
from the water.
While the facade looks like
Have you actually built this?
no.
It should be an amazing effect.
Yeah. I've got all the pieces. I'm just yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna because we're kind of moving well with the time, I'm gonna stop talking about my work and take you on a travel for a little while. In 2016, I was extremely fortunate to be awarded with the Churchill Memorial Fellowship. It's a fellowship that's given for people in UK to travel abroad and look at the, and sort of gain experience and bring things to Britain. And I went into this amazing journey to Europe and USA to look at architectural ceramics and to look how this has been done before, to look at the best examples of Gesamtkunstwerk, which is total work of art, where all the arts and crafts are incorporated in the building, making it into a piece of art. And as I said, it's been done before, it's been done throughout the centuries, it's been forgotten since, but my mission was to see how it's been done. And I traveled to United States, New York, and been just across the waterfall from you, just across in Buffalo, which is just across, and I went down as well. And then I went to Hungary and the Netherlands to see not just the best buildings with architectural ceramics, but to see manufacturing. And this was an amazing journey because I've seen how things have been done and how they're done now. You might know this building in New York. It's unbelievable. It's sort of Louis Sullivan, and it's been built at the same time as arts and crafts being happening in UK. So the whole facade is made out of ceramics. And some people might not know, but about 70 or 80% of Manhattan is built in clay. They look like stone, but the buildings look like stone, but it's basically a cladding to protect the metal elevation. It is ceramics, yeah.
It's not tiles. I mean, some of these tiles.
They are large pieces, and I'll show you in a minute how big they are. This is in New York, but this is in Buffalo. You can see these huge pieces of ceramics, and this is the way it's built. You see the section? So there are ceramic pieces that are really large. They've been made in a factory by hand mostly. So it's exactly the same techniques as with pottery, but on a larger scale. Fired and then they're assembled on a facade. Again, I didn't know much about this when I started traveling, but it was an amazing journey to visit the factory called Boston Valley Terracotta, who they're located in upstate New York, near Buffalo. Sorry, not Buffalo, sorry, yes, it is in Buffalo. Yeah, it's near Buffalo. And they are making and they are renovating those buildings from turn of a century. So lots of their work is about preservation and remaking many skyscrapers in New York. However, they have a lot of new built as well. So many architectural companies these days realize the value of ceramics, of being fire protection, fire protective, waterproof, and amazingly valuable as a maintenance-free, colorful material. So this particular factory makes ceramics on a larger scale to fit skyscrapers that are built with ceramics. So yes, there is things happening out there, and there are factories that are doing these things. Okay. In search of color, I traveled in Europe, and something that is really interesting about colorful ceramics. Southern Europe, Spain and Portugal have a lot of colorful ceramics. However, those ceramics are not frost resistant because the weather there is warm, and to achieve bright colors, you use usually low firing, which doesn't make ceramics frost resistant. So I went to Hungary to see this particular factory that produced wonderfully vibrant ceramics on a larger scale, and they are frost resistant. This is a small factory in Pécs, which is on a border with south of Hungary. And then I went to Netherlands. Now, Netherlands is very special to me because it's so close culturally and in terms of brick heritage to Britain. And there are so many amazing, wonderful brick buildings in Amsterdam, all across Netherlands. And here, Amsterdam School of Architecture, which was beginning of 20th century, with Michael de Klerk, one of the architects, who built many buildings which were actually his Amkost work by definition. They had detailing on the facade. They had amazing craftsmanship inside. I mean, this top right corner, the shipping house. If you're ever in Amsterdam soon, please go inside this building because it has amazing glass, stained glass roof and many detailing in wrought iron, making it complete work of art. So, yeah.
Where's the material coming from in Holland?
In Holland, it's a local bricks. Local brick, yeah, local brick.
Taylor, I believe that there is a question.
Yeah, I can read it. So Susan said, beautiful work, Dr. Gasparian. And in the UK, is there a percentage that must be spent on art in architecture? In Canada, there is a 1% that has to be spent for art in an architect's budget.
It used to be precisely exactly the same model years ago. I think it's not anymore. It used to be 1% for art about 10, 15 years ago. Now there is also a budget for art, and it's more of an obligation of large developers that have to provide artwork as a part of community engagement, as well as contributing to the city through their art. So it's I'm not sure whether it's not 1% anymore, but it used to be 1% for art, exactly the same. Yeah. Thanks, very good question. Anyway, so I'm gonna move quickly to two more. We have not too much time left, and I will really say that after this journey into Europe and US, I came back really fascinated and really wanted to contribute to cities, spaces through artwork. And I've built two projects which I'll show you very, very quickly in London. Using ceramic bespoke pieces. So first of all was London Festival of Architecture 2018. I won this competition for a small bench in the city, and trying to make it site-specific and reflect on a context, cultural context, and make it in contrast with the city environment, which is gray, high-rise buildings. I made a small bench, which was made with bricks. Was very limited budget, but it really incorporated colorful stained glass windows of the churches in the city spaces. And it had this ornamentation that was reflecting the locality. And again, I worked with the factory. I produced these pieces with Wienerberger, which is it is the biggest brick manufacturers in the world. I worked in their facilities. I painted things by hand, and you could see the brush strokes. That was something that I really would love to have in all my work, that it has that craft element. And people enjoyed it, which was a wonderful treat to see. It was quite popular for lunchtime, and children particularly engaged with the piece a lot because they were really perplexed, and couldn't understand, are we allowed to see, do we touch? And this is something that I'm really very passionate about. I think art, if it is in a public space, has to be used, has to be touched, has to be engaged with. And that is the value. That is real value. Yeah, so that was one. And the second one, very different context. This is very much arts and crafts context of a private road, private. It was basically a garden wall in North London, and the houses on the road are Edwardian, so it's 1900s, beginning of 20th century, with all the ornamentation, stained glass windows, embossed detailing. And what I've done, I've taken those detailings and tried to develop into something that can be applied on the outside. So it's taking inside and the outside, making again Gasparian's work with the outdoors. Techniques, again, working with a manufacturer in a factory, producing bricks that are all handmade, all bespoke, taking and incorporating those elements from the inside of the house on the wall. And this is the it's
amazing. It's such a difference to a wall.
Absolutely. But what was interesting, it actually blends into the streetscape very, very unnoticeably. So unless you are very close by, you wouldn't notice it because it's the same scale, same material, color of the brick matches everything else around it. But it's been just sensitively my water thing. I wanted to have something. I thought, I need a Gaudi in London. So the copings that run off the water, off the top of the wall, were very three-dimensional and very expressive. That was my something I wanted to do. I'm going to leave you with the last project, which is something that I'm not going to share because I'm just going to show you few images. It's on site. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go to start building, carry on building. Again, I'm only going to say that it's going to be benches, it's going to be pavers. And next time you're in London, I hope to see you there. But this is in Battersea. Again, craft context. It's beautiful mosaic manufacturing that was set on the site there. And lots of inspiration, lots of things to do in terms of bringing input into the new artwork. And I've collaborated with the local school children to make something that is temporary. I've been commissioned to do not just, this was actually a large competition, and I was I became a lead artist for this permanent artwork. But the link to this, there was a part of temporary artwork that was going to be wrapping around the building site. And this became a hoarding to go around the building site where the buildings are built. So people anticipate something happening out there.
Right.
So the children who, we've done this in collaboration with the graphic artists, on the walls. This is engagement, precisely. Yeah. And it did become part of the wall, part of the cityscape for whatever 2 years now. So this is just a hoarding that goes around the site, temporary. And this is the only image I'm going to share with you now, and there will be more to come.
You have to come back.
You've got to come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much, Maria.
It's a pleasure.
It would be great. We're going to stop sharing now. And do we have questions? I mean, what I can tell you is that since I met Maria and I arrived in London 2-3 days ago, I really have been looking around and looking up. And what I noticed is there are so many details, even in Toronto, which, I don't think is the most attractive city architecturally. But if you look up, if you take the bus, which brings you slightly, higher than your car, and you look around, there are so many details, and these details just uplift. They really do. So I think, to just make that effort to look up, to pay attention to little detail. And when we work with our children, our grandchildren, our friends and all that, is to always use that as a moment. Maybe a little competition on 100 meters when you walk in the street, going to your coffee shop and just look up. It's just extraordinary. So I have to tell you that since I met you.
I'm about influence.
question. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and mute yourself.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
Superficial.
The art should be integral to the building and superficial. Absolutely.
I think that brings extra value, if to be honest, Helen. I think I really agree with you. Quite very often, but particularly with 1% for art, when people feel that they have to bring an artwork, they buy something off shelf and bring it out of context and land it. It's called parachute art. You probably know that term very well. And it's the worst thing that can happen with as an investment. I think artwork really uplifts, it really brings value. It actually, it really can transform if you do it well. And I think when you integrate it into a building, it kind of does two jobs at the same time. It is super difficult, but if you work with architects collaboratively, and if you work with artists collaboratively, it actually can work in an amazing extent, as it used to. You know, we have these beautiful buildings. In Victorian times, we do have Art Nouveau buildings, amazingly expressive buildings that combine art and architecture, and then architecture becomes art. And that's the way it should be in an ideal world.
Absolutely. Good.
Yeah, there is
Any questions?
somebody raises hand.
Susan, yes, unmute yourself. Susan Collette, unmute yourself. Taylor, can you unmute Susan, please? Susan Collette.
Yeah. I'm trying to. Where are you, Susan? Sorry. There.
She's still mute.
Yeah.
Mute. Okay.
There we go. Okay, it should work in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Good.
Here we go.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Absolutely beautiful work. I really respond to how you've made the strict architecture into movement and action into the pieces. I'm wondering, I know you're the architect, but when you go up against maybe other architectural projects, are there ever like red tape and guidelines where your ideas are subverted, where you can't submit something because maybe it's not politically correct or safe? And then do you amend them, or do you say it has to be this way? Like, is there a lot of back and forth between a committee? Is that difficult to work with?
Yes. It is very difficult. It is very difficult. When I was architect only, the reason I'm doing this actually, I'm an artist now, so I come to architectural projects as an artist. When I was architect, lots of my work was just thrown away in a bin, and the reason for that is because of a red tape. Because lots of artwork seen as decorative only, and that's such a pity. It's such a mistake, in my opinion. I think artwork should be as important as bricks, as a structure, as communications, as a pipes and things. It's been seen, it's been marginalized for centuries. For whole centuries, been marginalized. So I think bringing art into architecture, it's more educational thing as well. It's not just about red tape. It's saying that it is necessary. The way you integrate is difficult, as I said, because of many red tape issues around architectural materials, because when you specify a material that becomes part of a building, it has to go through millions of regulations and millions of standards. Being an architect, I'm so aware of that, and being an artist, being an architect helps me to be an artist, to negotiate this red line.
That makes
sense. Because, for example, you cannot put a paver that is beautiful on the ground unless it's slip resistant. For example, it has to be slip resistant.
Right.
And because I know how to bake slip resistant pavers, I can make it, But many artists would love to do that, they wouldn't be able to. So there is a know-how. And I think the conversation between artists and architects are really crucial.
Yes.
And educating both sides is very important. And my PhD was actually bridging that space. You're absolutely right. I am a bridge. In my PhD was bridging between design and makers practice.
Fabulous. Great. Good on you. Very good. Great work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well, thanks everybody. Again, huge apologies for all the
hiccups. All right.
Thank you so much, Maria.
It's my pleasure.
back and seeing your bench.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
So I am in London, and starting on Wednesday, we have a group arriving, and we are going to be visiting Collect Art Fair and all sorts of interesting places. The theme of the trip is the influence of Indian aesthetic on British decorative arts, and how these two cultures are still so very intricate to each other and bound. I will be posting on Instagram, and I will be writing some reviews. So if you're not following us on Instagram, do so. If you're not receiving the newsletters, sign up. It's all on the website. And if you have friends who are interested, tell them about it. And we're also launching a lot of new trips coming up in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye on things. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you
Thank you
soon.
very much. Thank you for your attention.
Bye-bye.
Nice meeting
Thank
you.